Hello, Jeff Dollar here. Today I'd like to discuss an issue that is common in the IFB world, and that is for preachers to make themselves the heroes of their sermon illustrations. You may hear them winning 100 souls in one day, or winning hardened Roman Catholics to Christ in 5-minute presentations, or in the case of Jack Hyles, struggling against all odds to be a World War II paratrooper, saving his sister's life through his athletic abilities, or witnessing to Elvis in an elevator, or the famous "I'll take the bus kids" story on the streets of Chicago.
He said, "Pastor, we're tired of the bus kids. I represent the affluent people in the church. I represent the wealthy people. We've come to tell you that you have a decision to make. You've got to choose between us or the bus kids." I went home. Of course, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the choice that I had to make. I got in the car in the wee hours of the morning and began to drive. Finally, after driving over much of Chicago, I came to the very spot where I'm standing right now. And I began to cry. I fell on my face, flat on my face. I did not know that a crowd had gathered. Someone said about 400 people had gathered around this very place where I'm standing now. I raised my hand to the sky and shouted, "I'll take the bus kids!"
If you're familiar with the IFB world, you'll find that this is a common practice among many of their preachers. Very good storytellers, very good at public speaking, but you'll find that there is a focus upon them and their accomplishments.
In the last about 14, 15 years now, we've brought 2.6 million people to church. We've had over 420,000 people saved.
Somebody, a 4-week count. Everybody's won somebody for the last 4 weeks. Stand up. Yay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 34, yay, Sue, terrific! Our last year's Trainer of the Year, Sue, way to go, that's terrific. Okay, now I would like everybody to stand up that got someone down the aisle during our contest.
See, Marty, you're the only one. How many did you win the last 4 weeks?
230. Recently, Clay Strobel and I were out souling this week, and we drove by a Catholic school. And I said to Clay, I said, what's to stop us from walking over there and witnessing to those kids on the playground? And there was another standing there, and he said, well, let's do it. And to make a long story short, we went inside with him, and he introduced us to 3 other Jesuit priests. And we got to talking with him, and I asked him about the work, and I said, it's amazing what's being done here. And God somehow broke their heart in some way. It was just like that. They just melted. And before it was all said and done with, all of the kids in the class, 21 of them were saved, and also the teacher.
So you walked inside of a Catholic school.
Yes, sir.
And you walked inside of a classroom.
Yes, sir.
Where a nun was teaching. And the whole class of 21 got saved, and the nun got saved as well.
The average Christian, taking these stories at face value, many times will leave discouraged that they're not experiencing these things. Thinking that their struggles against sin and failures to convince a lot of people to be saved is because they are less spiritual and just not one of those top-tier Christians. When you think about it, generally these stories cannot be verified. They're either long ago or far away, no witnesses to corroborate them. But sometimes they slip up, and it comes back to bite them. Nearly 50 years ago, David Hyles wrote a book that was required reading for Hyles Anderson students. This book was entitled Successful Church Youth Work. And in this book, he included one of those miraculous soul-winning stories, but made the mistake of including a name. Chapter 5, entitled The Beginning of Teenage Soul Winning, gives the story. Looking at page 41, chapter 5. Teenage soul winning began as a result of a fall program contest in Sunday school. Contest was in the high school one department for freshmen and sophomores. It was 1969, and never before had a teenage department won a church-wide contest. Now, what these contests were, if you're not from this particular background, they would have whoever brought the most visitors would win a prize, who won the most souls would win a prize, and so on. The goal for the department totaled around 150. At that time, the teenagers had a once-a-month Tuesday night visitation program when they would meet at the church and receive prospect cards to go out visiting. About 20 to 30 teens would show up each month for their visitation night. And I was not involved at this church, but I was involved in some of these in a different church. At this time, the teenagers of First Baptist Church did not have a burden for lost souls, and most of them had never really gotten on fire for the Lord. In the high school one department, the contest theme was football. All the freshmen and sophomores from Hammond competed against those from the outlying areas. For the first time, the teenagers of First Baptist Church really did something to reach lost souls for the Lord. The goal being 150, the high school one department reached a high day of 250 teenagers. Each Sunday, there were many souls walking the aisle, and one Sunday there were as many as a dozen converts. From that contest on, the teenage visitation program of the First Baptist Church has never been the same. What was the secret? During the contest, 5 sophomore guys, 4 of my buddies and I, decided to start a teenage bus route to help win the contest. We decided to go visiting every Saturday night with no exceptions, and we did so with the help of 2 men in the church who drove us around. We placed an ad in the classified section of the local newspaper, which read as follows: for free transportation on a 120-passenger personally chauffeured limousine to the First Baptist Church, Hammond, Indiana, call, and then they had the phone number. And this is the part where the mistake was made of using a name. To the amazement of the newspaper and to the amazement of us boys, one person called. On the first day we ran our bus route, one fella came. This young man, Jim Perrone, trusted Jesus Christ as his Savior. Jim went home and the next week brought 2 of his brothers, and they too accepted Jesus Christ. The next week another brother came, and he too accepted Jesus Christ. Then his mother came, and she accepted Christ. Soon his grandmother came, and she also trusted Christ. At this time, 1974, this same young man is in Hyles Anderson College preparing for the ministry, and he himself is a fine soul winner. Almost 50 years later, this man saw this somewhere, and someone had told him that he was in a book, and he looked it up, and he had this to say. Now, David's poster boy description said, I got my mother and grandmother converted. Lies. I never tried to do such a thing to them, nor did I ever bring them to the church. A church I had long ago stopped attending myself. In fact, in all the years my grandmother was alive, I only saw her in Illinois. She didn't drive, and so we went to visit her. She was never in Indiana, where the church was with me. David made up these conversions because it made him look good. It should also be noted, I never once was preparing for the ministry and didn't consider it. I didn't have a desire to rip people off like the ministries I witnessed. This article says, written by James Perrone, editor for the Radical Center. James Perrone is the president of the Moorfield Story Institute, was the founding editor of Esteem, an LGBTQ publication in South Africa under apartheid. So we get to, of course, we can take some of it. You can take this with a grain of salt if you wish. I see no reason for the man to lie. Sometimes people behind pulpits present themselves as super intelligent beings. I remember somebody saying that John R. Rice won souls in his dreams. I think it might have been Jack Hyles who said that. I recall looking up to Dave Hyles as a great leader. But what went on behind the scenes while this book was being written? Mr. Perrone had this to say. I saw David bully boys at school along with seducing girls, and I tried to stay away from him. There is a part of this article which I won't read here, but it has to do with a practical joke that was played on another boy in the shower, which I don't think is quite appropriate for this channel. This was a long time ago, and many young men do regret their foolish behavior. I myself included. I would be embarrassed if some of the things that I did as a young person would be brought out. But remember, all of this was going on while he was preparing stuff for this book, Leading Teenage Soul Winning, and being held up as an example by his dad, Jack Hyles. Things are not always what they appear to be. All men are sinners, corrupt at heart, prone to sin. Beware when anyone, especially those behind a pulpit, speak well of themselves and promote their great accomplishments. We have a tendency to look and say, well, I wish I could be like that. A lot of that's a fraud. A lot of that is just like this. It was stories meant to puff the person up, meant to puff up their accomplishments. But ultimately, we're all sinners. We are to serve the Lord wherever he has put us, to do the best we can do, to open our mouth for the gospel and for Christ as much as we possibly can. But remember that we are but dust. We are to give him all the glory. We are to focus upon his word. For ultimately, as Isaiah 2:11 says, the lofty looks of man shall be humbled. The haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. May the Lord bless you in your search for truth.